Okay. I don't think anybody knows what this meeting's about, by the way.
Okay.
So we got 4 waiting, but I'm sure it'll drop down to just me and Chris watching it eventually.
Hey, everyone.
Hi, Corey. Well, there we go. We are live. I'd like to call this special meeting of the Board of Education Self-Evaluation Mid-Year Evaluation to order. It is 6:31. So thank you guys for joining us. And anybody that's watching, we're going over our mid-year self-evaluation tonight. And so that is the topic of the evening. We all took the time and went through all of the questions that we had set aside. There were a lot. There were 31 questions. And so it's like 9 or so pages of 7 pages of writing with all of us in. And I thought that I would read a couple questions, but if I don't really have a strategic plan of how to do this. I think generally speaking, we have all the information in front of us. We can talk about any parts longer than the others, but that this is the mid-year. So if there's a direction we want to turn and go, we can. One thing I would like to talk about at the end, and maybe it's more for the end of the year, is whether we want to do a mid-year evaluation or if we think one evaluation a year is enough for ourselves. So I just throw that question out so people can think about it now. The first question was, the board develops a shared vision and mission that reflects student achievement, community priorities, and communicates it to the community. I think generally speaking, and you guys please jump in, so I don't want it just to be me talking tonight, but I think generally speaking, we were all on the same page saying that we are well on our way on that. Thoughts?
There was a comment about how it's communicated. And again, I think that's going to be a recurring theme, is about how we communicate things to the community, and are we communicating things through the community, through Bill and through the district website and those sorts of things, which I think is appropriate.
Right.
It's just a matter of making sure that's happening.
Michelle, this kind of answers your question that you said you were going to talk about later, but I think it might be helpful. For me, the value of this mid-year evaluation is to see what points we, like, if there's any points of contention or any points of, like, where we're not sure on, and just make sure we're all on the same page. I don't think that the point of this meeting is necessarily to, like, come out with action plans. I think that's what we do at the final, with the final evaluation, and then that's part of our goals for next year. So I think I think most of us on this board are like this. When we see, like, this needs to be done, we're like, let's do it right now. But we do have a lot of stuff on our plate, and we already have goals that we're still supposedly working on from that we established in July. So this is, we kind of overlap it in a way, but I think that's a good thing, that we're already preparing for the next goal. So for me, the value here is like, okay, what do we see that's where, is there anything that we're off base or anything that anybody's not sure of? So
as you said that, I'm thinking like the beginning questions are more of those generic questions that we got when we did subscribe to the evaluation tool. So if you guys want to just skim down through them, and if there's something that's a point that we should talk about, I think that would be good. Probably number 7, because I think Travis had some, it's about policies, and I know that there's some questions going on right now about policy. So maybe just skip down to 7. But then some of the ones towards the end are actually about our goals. And so it might be good to focus our time on goals that we've already set and see the direction there, as opposed to the overarching topics, which are the first few questions.
to Corey's point, and I know we'll discuss this at the end, but it's been so long now, but I feel like there were questions in here that you can't really evaluate mid-year.
Mhm.
So maybe we could kind of hone down these questions and keep that in mind for next year. That's
Right.
my thought.
Yeah, I like that idea.
Travis, that is a good idea. You know, maybe have a shorter mid-year evaluation with just pertinent information and then bring the whole evaluation back for
Especially
the end
since
of the year.
we've developed this ourselves, right? We're not using their system anymore, and
Yeah.
so we can pick and pull what we want on it. So I guess a homework topic for everybody between now and the end year would be looking through these 30 questions, which ones are most relevant in your minds for the mid-year, so that in the summer while we're talking about things, we can adjust in that sense. So if we move down to number 7, and you guys can stop me and move me back up at any time. But if we move down to number 7 about the board has procedure in place for reviewing and establishing policies and developing new ones.
Do you want me to jump in?
Yeah, I just thought Travis, this would be a good time to jump in.
So we kind of talked about that at the January meeting. It went to the policy committee. We've talked about it. As far as I know, we're going to come back to you guys at the next meeting and tell you what we feel. I think it's settled.
Perfect.
And I don't know,
Okay.
Corey, if you have any thoughts on how we're doing as the policy committee as a whole. I mean, there's a lot of work. You know, we're making progress. It doesn't always feel like it, but there's a lot of work to be done. So,
Yeah, I think that we do need to I would like to come up with more of a systemic process, but I think that that's, and this is my comment here. Now that I'm on the policy committee, it's like, oh, this is a lot more to have it, even to come up with the process. I thought, I knew that it'd always be a lot of work to do it, but just to figure out what the process is, I think it's going to take some work. So for me, that's a more long-term goal of setting up that process than I would have thought originally. But yeah, I think that we're starting to work on this, but I think maybe that's something we talk about over the summer is, okay, how are we going to do a process? And that's a good thing to start brainstorming in our retreat is how do we start going over these policies in a systematic way. And maybe it's not a policy committee thing. I don't know. I'm trying to start brainstorming already. So I'll just leave it at that because we don't have.
I pretty much agree with Corey said. It's now we'll get through the year and maybe we'll kind of feel it out and we can discuss it more in July or whenever the retreat is.
Okay.
But as far as the question number 7, I think it's resolved.
Good. I just started taking
Michelle.
notes. Yes, go ahead.
Can we go back? I just want to make a comment on number 6 really quickly.
Yes, please.
And it goes back to even just last year being my first year on the board. I really enjoyed that time at the NISBA convention. So I hope, I mean, obviously there were some barriers in place this year for some more of our in-person team building. But I feel like that was really great to do. And I'd like to see going forward some more team building amongst us as a board and the superintendent. I think I really missed that this year, especially with Travis joining the board. And I feel like it's kind of hard to make some of those connections and just those little things that you can pick up on in a couple of days in a casual setting. So I really missed that.
Outside of the NISBA convention, how are you saying that should be done? Do you have any thoughts?
I'm not really.
We could do
sure.
self retreat and have it focused more on, we could have a topic or two to cover, but also have it be that social piece, and social not meaning just hang out, but the social piece and learning about each other and getting to know each other in that piece, because I think that was a big part of why that trip for us was so good. So we could make it a local thing if we can't get to NISBA, or find something else that we can all attend. But I think there's ways that we can.
Maybe we could find people who'd be willing, like maybe through NISBA, that would give us, a webinar just for our board or something on a topic that's more specific. to us.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of things we could do that would be outside of it. Maybe I don't know how it'd work. Maybe help us figure out how to do a socially distant trust falls. I don't think they work very well.
We might really need Ellen to jump in there.
We did just do something about
Our
concussion.
board use.
That's right. Wait for the nice deep snow if you're going to do that.
Right.
Okay.
So I'm just going to skim down. I think generally speaking, we adhere to our policies the best we can. There's always room for improvement. We are working on it. I think we are doing a good job. There is still more to go there. Board clearly understands the roles and responsibilities. I think we're there. We're kind of we remember when we get in the weeds, and that's been our thing, at least Ellen's and mine, since we've been on together. And I think that that's a good thing too. The board members publicly support the decisions of the majority and speak with a unified voice. I think we do that. Again, cut me off anytime, guys. The board develops a collaborative relationship with the superintendent. I think we do. I think that came through with, his review, that we all agreed that that was a good there. The board establishes effective communication with parents, staff, community members, and a chain of command. I guess this is a spot that we can stop for a second. I think we do, and I think we don't, right? Like, I think we do personally through Bill, and in that sense, I don't know what our role should be to do it ourselves, because if we do it ourselves, are we overstepping other things, and where is that boundary?
Because we have that communication chart, and
right. And so I think we do. I think there's room for other pieces, but I think we also need to decide what are those pieces and where are we overstepping, and what is our role? Our role is really the governance body, right? So should we be the communication piece? I don't know. I'm asking.
I think we communicate to Bill and then through his staff what we have in mind as far as communication, and then it goes from there. That's how I think it kind of does and should happen.
Yeah, my feeling on this is it's weird. It's impossible if we get a random email for you, Michelle, to get all our consensus on how to respond. But I think that if we come up with, what are some things, and I wouldn't say like a form letter response, but what are some guidelines of things that we can always agree on, right? So we can always agree that, you, for example, maybe you say, we hear this concern, we understand it, and we believe that this is best addressed by the superintendent. So we're moving that to him. Because I just don't want anybody to ever feel like we're not getting the message that we're some unreachable people for some reason. So just
I'd like to echo that as well.
You can always, we can just give you a blanket approval. You can always respond by saying, we hear that, even saying your message has been shared with the entire board. We read all these messages carefully. We'll let the superintendent respond to the specifics of your concern, or even say, please come to a board meeting, and if you want to raise this concern with us in person, right? There's all the other different avenues. So it's just ways that people know, we're open, we're listening, and we're considering what you say, even if we're not the best people to give you the answers that you're looking for.
And I think some people, it may be perceived that Bill is interjecting on things before it gets to us, when we know that that's not the case. But like Corey, you said, at least if we can send a blanket acknowledgement that we have seen it, but we're not really the proper person to address it, I think would be better than just having Bill or somebody always responding to the messages without a response from us as well.
Okay.
I think maybe we can even talk about, and again, I don't think we need to figure out tonight, but we can even talk about things like, how do you respond to different constituencies? Because I think that if it comes from students, I want it to be you guys are just the fact that students are taking any civic initiative like that. I think needs to get immediately recognized and praised, even if we don't agree with what they're saying, even if we're not going to do what they say, but they need to know, like, you did the right thing. Like, you emailed the board. Every student should feel like they can email the board. We might not be the ones dealing with this with you, but we
But
are.
we've heard it.
Yeah, we've heard it, and we take what you say very seriously.
Mm-hmm.
I
think
agree
those-
with that. Go ahead.
this is good.
Finish. I agree with that, but we also have this communication chart that we can't give mixed messages on. You know, people should always follow the proper streams of communication.
Right.
And you come to the board when all other avenues have failed. You shouldn't come to the board directly with a problem and go over the heads of the people that you should have discussed it with before. Obviously, we welcome input from everybody, but I just don't want us to discourage people from using our communication chart and policy on communication and complaints.
No, yeah, I agree, but I think that's what the response is partially. We hear you.
Yeah.
Here's who you should be talking to, and then if you feel like you can't get through, if you've gone through those channels and still don't feel, here's some other things you can do.
Okay, I see what you're saying. I agree with that, Corey.
13 says the board works with the superintendent to gain input from the community using forums, surveys, etc. We all seem to be on the same page of, yeah, we think we're doing this in a pretty good way. The board actively supports the district through its vision. The board is an advocate for the district's interests with legislators. I think this is a place that we need to develop more. I think we're doing a slight bit better right now since we've done this because of Jen and the position that she has. Now that we kind of made a position, right? Like, so now we are focusing on it a little bit more than we have ever that I know of. But maybe we need to do even more, but maybe this is enough for the mid-year piece and will help us develop a plan, because Jen will now have been ingrained in it for a little bit, that when we come to the end of the year to make a plan for next year, we'll have that piece involved and she'll be able to give us good insight of what we really need to focus on going forward. So I think we're all kind of in we can do more on this one, right?
I agree 100% with what you said. I think we've taken a first step, and then this is going to give us a foothold into like knowing more of what we need to do next year when we make our goals. Or I guess it is this year, in July of this year.
Well, I think it's been good too to make that connection with NISBA's advocacy liaison. And she's amazing and so knowledgeable that I've spoke to her a couple times now on the phone and through email. So again, I think it's good to even just make those connections, to be on the email list now, to be able to get things like I've passed on to you guys. I actually just passed one on not that long ago.
I know, I'm like, I can't read that before the meeting. That's too much.
So, and I think, NISBA gives us so many resources. I think just being able to know where to go and how to utilize those and to be able to spend time on them instead of, they give you the cookie cutter, but don't just submit the cookie cutter, make it really applicable to us, I think is important. And it's a good start.
And I think as we move from making this advocacy something that we're starting to figure out to something then we're involving the community with, that then has the dual purposes of us getting involved with the community and going, like, reaching out to them. And so we're kind of fulfilling two things with that. And it changes the dynamic of the board from being this body that kind of makes decisions and sometimes you can email and, you can yell at them at the board meeting and we'll try to like sit there and not say anything. To like, we're an active group. We're going out, we're recruiting people to like help us with this advocacy effort. And so I think that would be a positive overall.
Well, and Corey, that's one way to track too. So I think I mentioned this at our last board meeting, but NISBA actually has analytics as well. So they can actually go through and say, Hamilton Central School had 100 people that replied to this advocacy effort. So it helps us to centralize our goals, but it also, what our constituents want us to be focused on, as well as, being able to say, like, how engaged is the community? Like, if we're only having 5 people reply to every single advocacy effort and it's the 5 of us, it tells us we need to reach out more.
Right.
So I think we can get a lot of information from that as well.
Right.
The board adopts an annual budget. We're in the middle of the process, so we can and can't talk about it, right? Like, in the sense of, like, generally speaking, we do adopt it, or we have a process, but right now we can't talk about the process because it's just kicking off tomorrow. The board keeps the community informed about financial needs of the district. We do through the budget coffees and through a couple other sources, the new budget newsletter and things. We could probably do better, but what are those ways? I think that's an annual thing that we always talk about, right? The board facilitates a plan to meet the district student health and safety regulations. Yes, I believe we do. The board ensures that the audit committee functions in accordance with the regulations from New York State. I'll just be honest, I was the first one to answer this one, and my question was, do we have an audit committee?
Yes.
As a board like as a board audit committee.
We're
Is
an
that
audit
policy?
committee. Yeah, our board is the audit committee.
That's what I thought, but just because of the way it was stated, I was like, is this something different? And
Well, there can be there's different formats for it, but currently we are a committee of a whole. We just look over this policy. That's why not
there you go. The board supports recruitment of highly effective teachers. We definitely support that. The board members actively promote a belief in success of all students in the district. Board members act as role models. I think so. And then we get down to, basically 27 is where we start with our goals, right? So I guess if you guys are good, that's where I was thinking that we would spend a little bit more time and I wouldn't go so quickly. So we had 4 categories for our goals this year. Each are within the numbers. We had a couple of goals within those categories. I think we're doing a good job with the first set, which was in relation to develop a social emotional health plan for the staff and students, develop a method for assessing campus security, and the requirements regarding COVID. Thoughts there?
So we've heard a lot about a social emotional health plan for students. Where are we for staff? Do we know?
I don't, but I can find out and maybe have it be brought up in the board meeting and put that as a piece of the agenda.
Can I say about these? Sorry, this is like a
No, you're good.
meta commentary on it. I think this is where we've always I think we've done a good job over the last few years to start to change to where we have very solid goals, which we didn't really necessarily have before. We've never really made a distinction between board goals and the district goals. And I think that's where maybe next year is something else we can work on is let's make board goals. That our board goals are the ones that are centered on advocacy, right? We already know that seems like a good one. Communicating directly as a board, our professional development. Because all of these goals, none of us here should be reporting on them. This is all the district's job, right?
Right.
And these are the ones we make with Bill. I would love to have Bill as part of our discussion when we come up with board goals, but those should be the things that now we are the ones responsible for, not Bill. We don't delegate those things to anybody else, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. No,
So
I
I
like
think
that idea.
Looking at goals,
Great
I think
idea, Corey.
to our retreat. Yeah.
Because I agree, when going through this, I felt like, yeah, like generally speaking, we're on track for all these, but we're not doing it, right? Like, we're keeping a tab on Bill and his team in the school and the community in those senses, by the monthly updates and things like that. We know things are moving along. But yeah, are these really our goals? So in that sense, like, do we want to spend the time to go through these? So I don't know. I wrote that we should do district goals, and I think those are 3 huge ones. The professional development, advocacy, and board communications, like, internally.
I mean, even today we've already come up with also like the policy thing, figuring out policy. There's lots of things. And I think one of our biggest goals over the years, even if we haven't written it down like that, has been come up with district goals, which we've finally been doing. And like,
Right.
Things that we've been doing, I'd say the goals that we've been meeting are creating the goals, doing proper evaluations for ourselves, doing proper evaluations for the superintendent, right? Those are the things I think we've come a long ways on. And those are board goals. Those are things that we don't delegate, we do for ourselves. So I'd say if we were going to talk about how we're doing on goals, we could talk about those.
Yeah, like, I honestly wouldn't be. I think that's a good turn. Like, I think if you guys are good with it, that we break it down to those things and we kind of run with those. And at the end of the year, for this section of the evaluation, we change it, right? And we talk about this again and see where we're at and move forward with these things and plan for the next year which ones we want to continue, which ones we need to add, and things like that. All good with basically moving off the mid-year doc and just shooting from the hip? Yeah. Okay, so okay, I'm just going to start with professional development because we know that we want to do more, right? And COVID really hasn't let us do as much this year. So I'll start with that. I am taking notes, by the way. So if you wonder what I'm doing, that's what I'm doing. One. So I just put 4 notes that I think we talked about before. And I can't type and talk at the same time. I'm sorry. Not talented enough. So I wrote professional development. We want to do more. We'll do in-house and NISPA type trainings. But one is the personal connection is just as important as the educational piece. So we want both pieces of that, right? Like, we want to develop from both sides of that. So those are my notes. If you guys are good with that, want to add anything? We can move to advocacy. I can't say. Jen, thoughts? I'm going to start with you. Picking you out, man.
I think the easiest thing is to start with those take action plans. Again, and just making them personal. I think if everyone goes on NISPA's website and just looks at the advocacy page, there's a ton of beneficial information. I actually just recently got the webinar from the advocacy webinar that I did. That obviously, not everyone has to sit through the entire thing, but I definitely think there's pieces, and it's really helpful. It's really helpful to hear from the legislators, and to hear that they all agree, but you don't hear a lot of action steps. So I think knowing where the pressure needs to be on the legislators was really helpful to me. And again, just if there's something that is really passionate, we've got to speak up outside of our own circle. Internet is a perfect example right now. It's something that, we all struggle with in my house every single day. So it's every time I see something more about broadband, like I'm on that, and just kind of taking your passion and running with it. And then things that you're not so comfortable on, just trying to learn a little bit more about it, and maybe, figure out how it relates to HCS, but you wouldn't obviously expand as much in that area. But things that you're passionate about, definitely execute them and let them be heard.
Great. Other thoughts by anybody?
No, I think that, yeah, like Jen's doing a great job. And I think, like we've said, when we come back to the center to retreat, I think we'll have a good base to work with. Whereas Jen is keeping us informed over the next few months, and we're paying attention to what she's giving us, then we'll have a good base to say, okay, here's what we could do here in Hamilton. Here are some steps we could take over the next year.
I agree. I found some of the stuff that we get sent to us overwhelming. There's a lot of it, and there are some days where I'm just like, I can't, right? Like, we've gotten too much today and I just can't. But when it comes from you, Jen, I know that it's already been filtered a little bit, and not that you have the same passion as I do, but you have HCS passion, right? So you're sharing with us things that might be a little bit more priority, and I will spend the time on those. Like, that's why I didn't read your email yet today, because we got it right before the meeting and I wanted to actually spend the time on it, right? So if it was from NISPA, I might have skimmed it and called it good. And because sometimes we just get a lot from them and I don't know how it fits in always. So it's very helpful what you're sending.
Great, thank you. And if you have any other ideas of things, I try to just clip things out. So I've been trying to pay a little bit closer attention. And it's the same thing now that I've accepted this role. I pay closer attention to the ones that come from the advocacy liaison versus like the news clips that we get every day that have some great articles, but they're overwhelming. I don't have time to read every single one of those articles every day. And, all the executive director emails, which now I do look at them a little bit closer, but I skim, like, that's where I got the take action, but I just skim that part out of it.
Right.
To pass on.
Yeah.
And I think as we were sitting here talking about this, I think the other thing to do is really find out how to get the community involved in this. And maybe we need to get more involved ourselves before we know the proper way to push it out. But, do we put it on the website? Do we post it on Nextdoor Hamilton? Do we put it on the Hamilton Facebook page? I don't know what the answer is, but how to get the community as a whole more involved in these efforts, I think would be a really good goal after we educate ourselves some more.
Yeah.
Yep.
We can stay on this topic, and if not, then we can move to board communications. Anybody want to?
I guess my question with advocacy,
back to advocacy.
It's very important, but say, Jen, when you are doing all this NISBA stuff, are you advocating as a board are you speaking for the board as a whole, or are you speaking on behalf of yourself? Because that's where the confusion is.
So that's what's really nice about NISPA, and so they start you with a template that covers all grounds so that you're sure that you're compliant and you're not speaking as a board. So every time I do it, I'm signing my name. I'm not stating, I'm a board member and I'm representing this. They do a really nice job, again, at making sure that we're covered in all those respects. And that's why, for me, I prefer to start my efforts using their templates, because then I know I'm being compliant. Because I myself am not comfortable enough at this point to open up a Word document and type something to make sure that I'm not misrepresenting something that I shouldn't be.
Okay.
Wonderful.
You know, one thing, and maybe I'm not looking in the right place, but here we are talking about board and, you know, school goals. I don't believe they're updated to the website, the current year goals. The link I just clicked on, this year's goals are not there.
Well, we can get that fixed. That's highlighted on my notes here.
Do you think if we yell that really loud, Chris will just do it?
Press.
I was just thinking that. Didn't we say call if we need anything? But good catch, Travis.
He'd love that.
Well, and that kind of falls into the next topic, board communications. Although board communications is supposed to be meeting around us, right, Corey? I think that. Oh, that's still bold. Hold on. I don't need to yell at myself for that. I think, generally speaking, with board communications, we have different ways, and that we use them all, right? Like, we email each other, and we text and call each other, and so I think we are all on the same page with certain things, with everything, not with certain things, but that there probably is a better way to do some of it. But I think that when there's a hotter topic that we need to be aware of, those things aren't just emailed, or if they are emailed, it's followed up with a text like, see email today, or need you to respond in an hour, or something to that effect. So I'm curious, does that work for you guys, right? Like, I guess that's the question there.
What's the question again? Can you kind of
Board
rehash that question? Yeah.
Board communication, just generally speaking, how do we do? How are we doing?
Amongst each other, or?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I
I
just
guess
read
the
a
question here, and I think Corey, maybe you're the most up to date on it, but how are we doing as far as open meeting law, as far as our communication?
That's something I would be happy to have some more professional workshops on, because sometimes I always worry about like sending text messages, like when are we crossing the line? I think as long as we're not, seems as long as we aren't coming to any decisions by a text message that affect board business, we're fine. But how people define that, I've heard different people. You know, at the NISBA convention, you went to one with a open law lawyer, and it was like, don't even
want a different opinion, go find a different lawyer. Yeah.
Don't even weaken each other from across the street knowingly. And then, the others, that's like, yeah, as long as nobody's saying, I think we're fine. I don't think we do make any decisions that way. So I think we're doing well, but I'd be happy. That's another thing I think is we're looking at professional development. It's something that like none of us are ever going to be perfect at. So
right,
just doing something on there. And again, my kind of standing, like how I think about it is just assuming that everything is, open to the public. Like, am I going to send an email that I want somebody else to read? And being, only sending the things that I think could be read by somebody else, and then saving anything else that's appropriate for executive session, or just biting my tongue, I guess, if necessary. But so I think we're okay, but I think that obviously the strictures of the law make it hard for us to communicate really openly with each other. And then we're in like a weirder time where, like there was a time, that Ellen and I sat down to talk about a matter, that's totally fine for the two of us to sit down and talk about. But then I'm like, I don't know, like once we get technology involved, I have to email her and set up a time to like, all of a sudden we're getting all these other things going, and it makes it more complicated. So luckily we haven't had to have any discussions like that during this time, but it makes it a little bit trickier, I think. So, but yeah, I think we're fine as far as open meetings go. If there's anything that I saw that was a problem, I would say something.
Yeah.
But I think we're fine.
I think we all kind of call each other on that too when we start to have concerns, and you know, we've always had one person on the board who sort of seems to be the person that's the real eye for it, but then everybody else plays a role in questioning as well. I started to say I just read an article a couple of weeks ago that was about writing emails with military precision, and it was a little bit like what you were talking about, Michelle. And it's basically the email starts with, it's either, you know, must act, FYI, you know, I'm thinking of the emails we send to each other, meeting, you know, information. And so the very first thing in the subject header tells you whether, is this just an FYI, action required, you know, do I need to act on this? Or, and it just helps to prioritize those emails as they're coming through. I mean, I think, again, I mean, I don't think that's anything that needs to be set in stone, but I thought it was actually a very handy tool given the number of emails that are created in a day.
I would say overall, I think as a board, especially considering the many obstacles in front of us for communicating, I feel like we're surprisingly doing very well at staying on the same page. Our goals are, you know, we agree on the goals and the vision of where we want the district to go. And while we each have like our own unique perspective that we bring to it, I don't think there's any perspective that's in conflict with somebody else's in any way. So I think like right now we're in a really good place.
I agree.
Yeah, Michelle,
I think it's
thanks for
important
the
we-
text. I was just going to say thank you for the
go ahead.
text messages that you send, because I do try to glance at my email from time to time, but like Ellen was saying, like it's so overwhelming that it's nice to get those text messages to say, okay, I need to check this right now. Otherwise, it may be a crazy day at work and I might not get to it till 8 o'clock. So thank you for that.
I was just going to say that I think one of the things we've been doing well is whenever there might be a disagreement or however, we're very respectful of each other. And I appreciate that. And I think that's an important thing to do. Yeah.
I agree. Hold on. Chris just checked in, asked if everything was good. I told him we were.
Except for our goals.
So the last couple things were policy, come up with district goals, and proper evaluation. And I think that those things we can kind of sum into one. And I'm not in the sense of, we already talked about policy before, right? That we're moving in that direction. We're trying to get better. We have some goals that we were already thinking about. District goals, we did that last year, and they're working through them. And so we're in a good line there. And evaluation, same thing for both of us. Like this is year 2 of self-evaluation. Like it was a never heard of thing before. Like it would be very interesting to see when the last one really happened, you know? So I think we should be proud of ourselves for, especially you, Corey, for saying this really matters. It's really important that we do this. And for the rest of us saying, you're right, and let's make this happen and let's make this a priority for us. And then we've spent the time to do that. So any other thoughts on those 3?
I guess I agree with what Corey says about the mid-year. I do. But we're talking about team building and all that. Can you have more than one board retreat in a year?
You can have as many as you want.
Mid-year retreat where this could be discussed and any, you know, kind of like a mid-year reset, and it might kind of alleviate some of the concerns that Jen had about, you know, team building and all that. Is that something worth thinking about?
Also, yeah, I think especially if you're doing anything that's like, if we're considering it as, you know, a team building, we're not talking about anything with the district, we're totally fine. Just like you could all come over to my house for dinner, we'd be totally fine. We can't right now. Ellen would get that. But we could do stuff like that easily. The other thing is, I think if we're going to do, to me also, like if we're going to do retreats and workshops like this, why don't we just make them public? Like if anybody wants to come, it's not like people are banging down the door to like bother us during these things, you know? So if somebody really wanted to come and watch us make goals, have at it. If they're that invested, then maybe they've got some good ideas to share as well. So
So
I think
make
if we're ever like, should we make it public or not? Just make it public, and if anybody wants to come, they can come.
and make public in the sense of now, if we are still virtual, just so that I have a clarity, does it mean be on the screen with us in this sense, or be able to chime in on
Well, yeah, virtually, I think it would be like,
the chime in part?
I'm thinking more like in the future when we're doing
Yeah,
back to normal things.
but yeah, that somebody could, if we did our workshop retreat in the auditorium, people could sit in there and come and go as they pleased and listen to as much as they wanted. And
even in the library, and it's
right,
like, we're never gonna have a crowd
no,
for a workshop.
You're
retreat.
not saying the like the retreat we had earlier this year. You're not saying that should be public, are you?
That I've heard different opinions on. That's the one that
Yeah,
the,
I don't.
the
I
one
wouldn't be in
lawyer, the
favor of
open
that, I'll tell you
meetings
that.
lawyer, was like, that should be public. And to me, it's also like, well, why not? Like, I understand like it's nice to do things in a setting where we can speak a little bit more freely, but I also think if we make it public, if we're not, first of all, I don't think anybody's gonna come, and if they do, like, we'll come. I don't like. There's nothing we talk about that's. We're not going to talk about anything that should be confidential.
right.
Right? It should be an executive session. So, I mean, if
I
they
guess
want
the only thing, if we had a
out,
speaker come, they might not be as candid if it was open to the public. There's a argument against it.
yeah, but I think that those ones would be easier because we're definitely not doing any business of the district, right? Like they could talk to us about what they have to say, and then we just don't bring up like our specific concerns, and we don't come to any decisions or discuss any matters from the district.
I mean, to clarify, the beginning of the year retreat, I think, should stay as it is. If we had a mid-year retreat, yeah, by all means, let the public in. That's my take.
Yeah, and if we're keep building, I think maybe we do need some more people for my trust fall. I don't know if I want all of you trying to hold me up.
No, and I can definitely see both ends, but I agree with what Travis is saying. I think some conversation takes place too, and sometimes we each put a personal opinion in or give our side to then come up with the greater goal. And my only fear with making it public is if somebody were watching, would it be perceived as, okay, this person always thinks this way and this person thinks this way, and would it make us, when we're together, more of individuals versus the board is behind this and this is the goal? Because there's definitely some conversations that take place. I remember writing the mission statement, and like that went back and forth. I don't even know how many times. And
yeah, and I think you're right, especially if
Yeah,
what this is like in 4 years, 5 years, how the board changes over that amount of time could be maybe not. I think I really do think we're maybe exceptionally on the same page as opposed to like I don't think this is the rule of how boards work. It seems like a little bit more of an exception, so I could see that being a bigger issue in the future for other people too. So,
but depending on what we're doing, I mean, if we're doing a workshop and we have a presenter, that could be open because we're learning, right? Like,
it's part of what we discovered when we discovered the workshop option. I mean, several years ago, it's been within my tenure on the board. It was about halfway through, somewhere along the line, we discovered that these workshops were even an option, that we could have these public meetings to discuss things that we were struggling to figure out how to discuss things in an open way, in the way that we needed to. And we discovered that we even had this option to do workshops, and it gave us the space to be able to sit and have conversations without having to do it, at the meeting, having to have these time-consuming conversations at the big meeting where there's many other things to do. It also allowed us to be able to have conversations without requiring public comment opportunities, which is something that we've needed to do sometimes, because we needed to be able to talk through our the things we needed to talk through, and sometimes having that space to do that without the public comment session was actually helpful. And so, I mean, that's how we came to using these workshops in the first place. So
That was
it's been
about
a nice
4
tool.
years ago or so, wasn't it, Ellen?
Yeah.
The other part of the evaluation, I think I posed the question in the beginning, and we kind of answered it in the beginning, was that, you know, a mid-year for us might be helpful, but maybe a toned down version, right? Like instead of doing questions 1 through 28, we just focus on 5 questions to see where we're at mid-year, and then at the end of the year, we hammer in all those other ones or sorts of the other ones. And we don't have to use the questions that we have. We used the basis of the system we had been on for this year because it was available to us at the moment. And it continued us in a good round of making sure that we kept this as a priority for us as a board and make sure that we did do our self-eval, which I really like going through this. I thought it was really helpful for me, like just personally going through the questions and having to actually think about those things, you know? So I think generally speaking, a mid-year is not a bad thing, but maybe a cut down version.
Well, and I think maybe more specific to the board version. I feel like in a lot of these questions, it did make you think about things, but I felt myself saying like, the district does this, or Bill is doing this, or so I'd like it to be more specific as what is the board doing for this? Like Corey said, and separating our goals, I think would help us to make it more in line with that.
Yeah, so I was going to say, I think once we have board specific goals, then the mid-year evaluation can be, how are we doing on our goals? And then I'm like you, if I like going through, like I'm happy to go through everything and just put in comments, even if it's just like a lot of them were just like yes, yes, yes. But then, you know, in addition to the goals, we at least have that and say, where are we? What are we not agreeing on? Is there something we're not agreeing on? And so that gives you a chance to like stop and pause and say, oh, you don't think we are doing enough on policy. Maybe we need to talk about that. And so the mid-year, I think, is a good point to say, like we did with the advocacy, like I don't think we would have thought of, like, at least I wouldn't have thought of like, oh, let's put that as a goal for next year.
Right.
So I think that's the point of the mid-year is what are the things we need to see? Like, how are we doing and what do we need to do different next year?
A takeaway I took from this survey, if you will, is we've kind of talked about, yeah, we have these board goals, but they're not exactly our responsibility to implement, obviously. But we are the oversight for all of these things. So something I took from is like, yeah, I think we're doing it, but how are we overseeing that? And those are areas where maybe it's worth having discussions in the future, or some self-awareness like I've taken, like, okay, like, yeah, let me inquire on this because I'm not sure and I should know. That's where I think a mid-year kind of helps.
Yeah, or maybe there are things that like we don't realize, like that's been delegated to a committee, and so like somebody new would say like, are we reviewing policies? And then the policy committee is like, no, yeah, we're doing that.
Yeah,
you don't have to do that. We've figured out how we're doing it with the policy committee. So that's a good time, I think, for us as a board to just make sure we're on the same page on those types of things too.
Yeah.
Or the opposite. It's like like the fridge, the fridge at work, right? You never know. Like nobody cleans it out because you never know who's what, right? Like maybe like there's things that we're not doing, and I just assume like, oh, I assume that they're doing that, or somebody's doing that, right?
Well, there was a couple of in my answers were like, I don't know. And I don't know if that's good that I don't know. And then once I compiled everybody, it was nice to see that, we were kind of either in line and it wasn't something that we needed because it was more of a district and not on us and that type of thing. Or I was the one that was left out because I've never been on the policy committee. So now, reading your answers, I'm like, oh, now I know why I didn't know that, because I shouldn't know that necessarily, right? Like generally speaking, us as a board, we know that, but the individuals of us might not need to know that piece, and that's okay, So. thoughts, general thoughts? Are we in a good spot? Yeah.
I think it gives us a good direction on where over the next few months we feel we need to head as a board. And
Good. Well, I'm really glad we didn't do this after our marathon meeting last month.
Oh my gosh.
I had no brain power to do this, and I'm glad that I was able to like comprehend what we're doing and be a part of like a well thought comment, because it wouldn't have happened last month.
We've had a lot of long meetings. I don't know what it was that meeting though, but I was like dead. Like I literally just laid down on the floor for a few minutes after.
Well, I tried to go right to bed, which was the dumbest thing ever because I was exhausted, but I went to bed and I was up for an hour and a half. I'm like, oh my God. I had to walk around the house for a little bit to settle down a little. And not that there's anything wrong with it. It was just the Zoom fatigue. It was a Zoom
like a crazy meeting. It was just like, long. I think that's what's so hard.
A lot.
Like a lot of just like this stuff.
Yeah.
You know, on my end, I was ready to go. I kind of came into this expecting like meetings that might go into midnight, but you know,
Thankfully, I don't think that's ever happened.
I was
No?
going to say 10:30 is really pushing it for us as the longest go around. So
I think you're right about the Zoom. It's the Zoom too.
it was the Zoom fatigue on that one, but
yeah, I do think it'd be different in person. I feel like in person I have like a little bit more oomph, and I don't have a clock staring right at me in the corner of my screen. And I don't have like there's
your whole
less
family going to bed around you.
yeah, like there's less distractions. I don't hear stuff in the other room. I don't see email popping up over here. I don't, and maybe it's this whole dual monitor thing too that sets me into like this trap of, oh wait, I need to block that out, but it's hard to do sometimes. So
Yeah. Well, we did not do the pledge to begin with. I am sorry, I missed that. I just started in. Does anybody want to do the pledge right now, or are we good missing that piece of the agenda?
I
'Cause
think
it was
we didn't
actually-
really have a formal agenda, did we?
Well, I mean, it was posted.
What I'm saying is the pledge wasn't on the agenda that I saw.
It's on the one online.
Was it?
Yeah.
I didn't see it the other day.
On the
But-
upside, we are not legally bound to any agendas, so it's okay.
No, and I don't think we're legally bound to doing the pledge during the meetings either. So, but I wanted to note that I did miss that because I'm sorry. So noted.
We'll do it
I do
twice in a week. How about that?
I do need a motion to adjourn if we are
Really
at that
quickly,
point. Yep.
before
Very-
we adjourn, I just want to make one more advocacy plug. Did
Yep.
everyone get their 2021 resolution survey? It talked about email things. I can't forward that because it is unique, but that's our number one start to advocacy. It came from Paul Heiser at NISBA, and it says help set NISBA's advocacy agenda. If everyone could star that and
I can't
complete
find
that. So
Um,
NISBA uses that to set their advocacy goals and where their efforts should be. So please, like I said, star that and please do that.
Okay.
It's
Was
just
that
from
the s-
today. That just came today, right?
It just came today,
Oh, it did?
came this morning.
8:02 this morning. Mine is.
Well, is it still in my inbox then? Oh, I'll look for it. I don't seem to have it.
Search Paul's name, and it came. Mine came right up when I searched Paul's name.
Paul.
Yeah,
Yep.
Paul
Paul
space
Heiser.
Heiser.
Oh, where did he go? I just saw him in my. The last thing I got from him was the 17th of February.
No, I have it from today.
Yeah, I got it too.
I think I got it. I'm not positive, but I recall.
You've
seeing
been
it.
excluded.
Uh-oh,
Yeah.
Michelle.
Or you
Make
If
sure
you
you
can't
advocate for
find
that.
it, yeah, if you can't find it, let me know and I'll have Danielle resend it to you.
Yeah,
But
I
that's
don't have
really
it.
important.
I don't delete any emails, but I did check my trash, and like the only thing I delete are like the meeting invites after I've accepted them. And the last thing I have from Paul is February 17th.
Okay, I'm gonna reach out to her and ask her to resend that to you.
I will keep my eye out for it.
All
Thank you
right.
for doing all this again.
No problem. I'm learning a
Um,
lot in the process too. So
Yeah, that's a
Yeah.
good thing.
Awesome.
Have you had a talk with Matt yet about the things that we don't want to advocate with for?
I have not.
Can I have a motion to adjourn?
I will move.
second.
Travis, Corey, sorry, they beat
No,
you
you're
to
good.
it, Jen.
And
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
That's a 5 right there. Chris, if you can hear me, sir, you may turn off the feed. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you.